and as we get into training, my background in CrossFit, as much as I loved and still love parts of that training, I feel like we really got into seeing how far we could overtrain our bodies and still sort of live. But I really started to become aware of like people with poor testosterone levels and the overtraining side of things when I was competing in CrossFit. It seemed like our sole focus was to push ourselves as far as we could, go a little bit further, but we never fully understood like what a deload week was, or how to periodize a year, because it was just go, go, go. None of us had the knowledge. We just weren't in that mindset. When people come to you and they're experiencing kind of the low energy levels, maybe like some signs of depression, they don't have excitement to get to the gym. What are some of the kind of like the checklist of going through someone's training program and assessing where they're at and kind of taking steps forward?
I think you always want to check and see if someone's progressing. Do they have drive to actually go to the gym? Are they enjoying their program? I think people forget that with too much training volume, anytime we're exceeding our body's ability to recover, there's going to be a stress response there. Yeah. And that stress response is what we see in terms of then that hormone, when we have additional cortisol in the body, starts to influence that androgen production, because your body's basically saying, well, why would I want to make more reproductive hormone when you're already putting me through all of this stress as it is? Cue kind of that dude we were talking about in the first part of the series from 1,000 years ago. To him, if he's moving all this stuff around and he's super stressed and he's overworked, is that really a safe environment to bring in a baby? No, not really. Does it make sense to, our bodies are basically these misers of energy. We conserve energy, regulate energy to keep us alive. So your body kind of goes into this more antiquated approach of, well, how do I save energy? Well, I can downregulate thyroid hormone, I can downregulate testosterone, and cortisol will break down more energy in the body, which will free it up for that next training session where you're going to kill yourself. Yeah. And that, when you do that long enough, that's where you see people run into some issues with like adrenal insufficiency and things like that. So I always look at like drive to actually go to the gym, recovery. Are you progressing on your lifts? Because you should have some metric-based movements in there, whether you're doing powerlifting, strongman, bodybuilding, having some metric-based movements. And then your accessory work, that's where you can sort of adjust your volume accordingly. But I think that's a great place to start for
I love that too. If you feel like you're getting stronger, probably doing okay. I feel like on the men's side of things, we always talk about testosterone and low T, and then you get to the female side and they always say that they have adrenal fatigue. Is there a difference? Do they it seems like they have this fun little balance with each other, with the same symptoms. It's just different how we talk about them.
Yeah, I think some people mistake one for the other and vice versa. I mean, guys can certainly struggle with, you could have a testosterone issue that's rooted in, adrenals, thyroid, and gut health, or you could have a testosterone issue that's just solely, maybe you had a pituitary injury or traumatic brain injury, concussion, something like that, that's influencing your pituitary. But what the way the adrenals sort of relate is when we have a lot of production of cortisol, that inhibits this regulatory protein that allows us to make androgens. So in men, the reason we're associating it with low T and not just what's going on with the adrenals is because we will feel it impacting that sex hormone production, that testosterone production. And that's very, very specific. So a lot of people don't go into the science of that, but it's just called star protein. Basically is a regulatory protein that helps us makes our cells make more testosterone. And so anytime you have this overabundance of stress, you're going to see this downregulation. And so I always remind people, and we don't need to get super into the science in that sense, is just these systems are all connected. They're not in silos. Like if your adrenals think there's a problem, if your thyroid is perceiving, or technically it would be your brain, right? So it'd be your hypothalamus, your pituitary. But if they're sensing a problem and they're pulling resources from one area or downregulating one, eventually the other one's going to go. It's just kind of like which one's going first. If you had a three-legged stool and one starts to go, or you're having compromised structure, you're going to end up with a problem. So I think that's why men associate it that way. I think it's also just, where is the education in media, or like for guys, it's like you see commercials, it's low T. It's not your adrenals. I think with women, oftentimes they're marketed to in a certain way, We talk about adrenals, or we talk about post-birth control syndrome and things like that, or thyroid, and guys are just quick to hop on it's my testosterone. Well, did you think that reverse dieting, sleeping more, getting your adrenals under control, having more parasympathetic activity, and getting your thyroid in the right place, like naturally, that's gonna be really good for your testosterone levels as a dude. It's probably also gonna free up a lot of that active hormone that you're making naturally already.
When I talk to a lot of CrossFitters, or when I talk to kind of like pure strength athletes that are going after it and attacking it really hard, they love to bang intensity and hang out all the way on the extreme side of like heavy weights, fast all the time. And then you ask them how often they train, how slow they can go, and the conversation gets really quiet, like showing up to a yin yoga class, or like how slow can you actually move as well to actually be training your body on the full spectrum of movement or intensities. And the conversation gets really awkward really quick because that's seen as completely pathetic. Do you incorporate like a lot of meditation or down regulation tactics like that, yoga classes, to kind of balance people out when they first come to you?
I think it depends. Like for a lot of people, they're already stressed with their current life, and so to give them another thing to check off, it may put them in a place of overwhelm. So I try to start with the basics. It's like, what's something that you liked doing as a kid that you no longer do as an adult? Did you play guitar? Do you like to draw?
Yeah.
Do you like music? Do you like to walk outside? Do you play sports?
Yeah.
Those things just bring people more happiness and joy, and like that's a good part of recovery. Not everyone is great at meditating. For some people, it might be switching a particular day of your lift. Like maybe you hate traditional cardio, you want to go swim, you want to go for a hike. I think that's an area of improvement. Just getting outside. A lot of people, if they have pets, I'll just be like, dude, just go walk your dog, like, relax.
Walking's awesome.
Yeah, walking's a great parasympathetic activity. It's one of the few things you can do that are actually, it's increasing calorie expenditure and your NEAT, which is a huge, I mean, we could do a whole series on metabolism, but you're increasing your non-exercise activity without straining that central nervous system, which usually, oftentimes with these athletes, is already firing a little bit too much. So you get that, but it could be an example simple as like for me, like I know I should spend more time like with music or playing guitar. If I don't do a good job of that, I'm not spending a lot of time on recovery. Other people want to read a book. It's really what's going to kind of have that shutting down effect. Some people like yoga. If you can make time for yoga, that's great. But if it's going to stress you out to go drive across town to do yoga, you're going to defeat the purpose of what you're doing. And some of these people are already so active, like pulling additional recovery resources.
I would do anything to find a dark room where I can just lay down and breathe for an hour. It's the greatest. It's like the exact opposite of what my normal day is like. I feel like that was when I found yin yoga. It was like the healthiest thing that ever entered into my life, because it was just quiet, and it was dark, and there was no phone, there was no anything, and it just changed everything about like just my perception of overall health and what I needed to be doing to train the other side of the spectrum of the intensity that I've been cranking for the last 20 years.
And I think that's important too, like your perception of that activity, like that's what's relaxing for you. Other people, it might make them anxious to be in a dark room by themselves for an hour. And that's why, so even when talking about testosterone, I try to make it super, super simple. It's whether you're a CrossFitter, you're a strength athlete, you're a bodybuilder, you have some type of physical goal. Usually it's you either want fat loss or you want greater performance, you want to squat more. But all of that's always preceded by your physiology, and that's the testosterone. That's what we're talking about in this series. But that testosterone and that physiology is preceded by your daily practices, which is like, okay, your meditation, habits, routines, rituals, your macros, your calorie. Are you eating good quality foods? Are you sleeping enough? Like that's a practice. And then what you said about like that mental state that you achieved and your relationship with that activity, that exercise, that's perception. Those, that's kind of what I incorporate into a model. Like anytime I talk about a transformation or I'm talking to other coaches, trying to teach them how to apply this stuff, it's like, let's look at this person in this spectrum and like, how are they trying to get to their physical goal when their physiology is all jacked up? It usually originates, unless they have like a genetic trauma or like an injury of some kind. Most of the time, it's going to come back to these basic things like eating enough food, sleeping enough, what type of recovery protocols do you implement? And, do you have a good relationship with exercise? Or are you doing CrossFit 14 times a week because like you're miserable about something else in your life? Like I think that's where we have to zoom out and like have some perspective.
Get into the description. There's a free men's health guide to testosterone written by Sam. And where can people find you?
SamMillerScience.com or the podcast.
SamMillerScience.com. What's the name of the podcast?
Sam Miller Science.
Sam Miller Science. Make sure you check out episode 3.
Yeah, you're on 3.
I'm number 3.
3 or 4.
3 or 4. Check it out.
We're popular in Slovakia.
We're huge in Slovakia. They heard the name Anders. They were like, that's my people.
Yeah.
Get into the description. Free guide to men's health and testosterone. And we'll see you guys next week.